Okay, everybody. Um, welcome to um, welcome to this info session. We're here to talk about some BES stormwater updates. My name is Adrienne Iona, and I manage the team that updates the codes and rules for the Bureau of Environmental Services. I am joined with my coworkers, Alice Coker and Amy Simpson today. And then I also just want to recognize the other member of our team, Henry Stevens, who's spent a lot of time working on this update as well. And then Erin Abrams from BES is also here providing some Zoom support. We are recording this today, and the plan is to post it on the web. So today we're going to share some information about some upcoming stormwater policy changes that the Bureau is working on. The update to the Stormwater Management Manual, some related code updates to Chapter 1738, and then a proposal that we have for changing how we manage Green Street planting and establishment for public works permit projects. All of these will go into effect on October 1st. Here's the presentation overview. First, I'll focus on the Stormwater Manual. That's really the meat of this presentation. We'll talk about the document structure, which has changed, the applicability and policy changes. I'll walk through the new hierarchy and some performance standards. Then we're going to talk about kind of our newest technical requirement for water quality infiltration. And then get into the facility design details for private and public facilities and share some updates about drainage reserves. Then I have two other related items that will be going to council, the code update, and then this public works permit planting and establishment fee. So just to get us started, the Stormwater Management Manual requires stormwater management for development activities that add or replace impervious area. It applies in the right-of-way and on property. It also protects drainage ways on private property. We have these requirements to comply with our own regulatory requirements, to protect watershed health, and to meet our stormwater system needs. Here's the schedule. Public comment. The public comment period opened on Monday of this week. We're in our first info session today, and then we'll have another one next week on the 24th. The material will be the same for both of these presentations. The public comment period closes on August 19th. We'll be taking the code updates to City Council at the end of the month on the 31st. And then when all of this goes into effect on October 1st in the fall, we'll have a 3-month grace period for applicability. So here's our new table of contents. You'll see it has a lot more chapters and sections than before. The goal here is to kind of make it faster and easier to find the information that you're looking for. I'm going to highlight a few changes here. We've expanded the current Chapter 2 and 3 Stormwater Facility Selection and Sizing and Chapter 3 Private Stormwater Facilities across these 4 chapters. So Chapter 2 will now be focused on site evaluation and planning. This will include setbacks, infiltration feasibility requirements, and infiltration testing, among other things. Our new Chapter 3 covers the simplified approach. The simplified approach is a prescriptive design approach that is available for projects that have 10,000, smaller projects that have 10,000 square feet of impervious area or less. This is the approach that's mostly used by contractors and does not require the involvement of design professionals like an engineer or a landscape architect. And so consolidating all of this in one chapter is going to make it easier for users to find this material. So because we've made that chapter, we've also separated out the presumptive and performance approach project performance standards into Chapter 4, and that'll be where more of the engineering guidance is held for those larger projects. And then we have the facility designs for those design approaches in Chapter 5. We've also consolidated and pulled forms, standard operations and maintenance plans, and the facility details into separate standalone sections that will live at the end of the document so that they're easier to find. Right now, they're folded through the document in the chapters where you would find them if you were reading it cover to cover, but that's not how people access the manual. And so we're putting these in kind of separate locations so they're easier to find. Now I'm going to get into some of the policy changes. Kind of our biggest policy proposal in this version of the manual is increasing the applicability threshold for which projects need to comply with the manual from 500 to 1,000 square feet. This threshold will be applied at the project, not just the site scale. So if you're coming through with a batch of residential building permits, this would apply to all of those as a group together. So it would be 1,000 square feet for all of them together added up, not on a tax lot by tax lot basis. This change will decrease the number of building permits that will be required to comply with the manual by 18% about, and while only reducing the overall impervious area managed by about 1.8%. And those numbers are based on review of SWM permit data over a 10-year implementation period. We also are changing some of our right-of-way Green Street requirements. In the UIC area, the underground injection control area, which is in outer East Portland, where stormwater is infiltrated into the ground and underground systems, we will allow development in that area to comply with the SWM with just using a UIC, which are also called said sump systems or dry wells. We also will expand automatic eligibility to pay the offsite management fee for regular users of the manual. This is called the staff review special circumstances process. We're going to expand that to include sidewalk and shoulder widening projects, any development project in the combined system, and any development project with 120 linear feet of frontage or less. So the outcome of all of those changes is that we'll really focus Green Street development on larger projects in the separated storm system. And this really allows us to focus that the growth of those assets in the parts of the city where we have the greatest system need. We also have some proposed changes to the pavement exemption language. These are only the ones where we're changing the language. These aren't big changes, but it's mostly rewording existing language. We'll now go back to talking about standalone utility trenching projects, standalone base repair of public streets where less than 50% of the street is repaved. This big change here is this sort of mixed projects for other structural pavement repair. So if you're doing a mix of things that requires pavement replacement, that including reconstruction of a curb and the associated pavement restoration, base repair, and pavement restoration for excavations and trenching. When you've got a large project that has a mix of those things, when that area exceeds 40% of the road area, that's when you'll need to be required to comply with the manual. Some other policy changes is we're removing the language from the manual that references the total maximum daily loads. That's because while the SWM helps the city comply with our TMDL requirements, there aren't any additional design actions that are required for SWM compliance to meet those requirements. So all of the standard requirements for facility sizing are the same. And so we don't need to call out these, the TMDL for specific water bodies separately. We're removing the landscape non-conforming upgrade trigger. This is a trigger that results in a significant number of permit reviews, while very few actually result in an upgrade. We're clarifying requirements for new connections and routes of conveyance. And for that in particular, we're like outright stating that if you're building a new curb where one did not exist before, or formalizing a drainage system, that counts as a new connection or route of conveyance, even if that water is ultimately ends up in the same place as it did before. We're also clarifying Port of Portland operations and maintenance recording requirements. So Port of Portland properties are not required to record O&Ms with the county against the property deeds. The city and the port will hold those records kind of in our own records, not with the county. We have some changes to the stormwater infiltration and discharge hierarchy. So here's here's the full hierarchy, and I will kind of walk you through this. So level 1, full on-site infiltration, requiring full on-site infiltration for sites that have an infiltration rate of at least 2 inches per hour. That remains unchanged. The big changes are in level 2 for sites that discharge to our storm-only separated storm system. For sites that discharge to the Willamette River, Columbia Slough, or its tributaries, the requirements will be to provide water quality treatment or flow control. And the key change here is that that flow control is going to be based on the pipe size for where you're discharging, rather than the current requirement, which is a general flow control is required if there isn't adequate pipe capacity. So this now will just base that on a known value for what the size of that pipe is. And then we also hold, if you're discharging to a non-city system, the owner of that system, for example, the drainage districts, can determine whether flow control is required. Then for discharge to other surface water bodies, these will be our smaller streams, smaller upland streams, Tryon, Fano, Johnson Creek. The big change here is that we're adding a infiltration requirement for sites where infiltration is allowed and the infiltration rate is at least 1/2 inch per hour. In those locations, we will be requiring infiltration of the water quality storm event. Then if infiltration is not allowed, or if the infiltration rate is less than 1/2 inch per hour, those sites will be required to provide water quality treatment and then flow control for storm sewer system capacity or hydromodification, depending on how that's feasible for the site. The requirements in the hierarchy for level 3, discharge to the combined sewer system, remain unchanged, and we require flow control for the combined system. All right, now I'm going to get into these performance standards. In this version of the manual, we're establishing this new terminology for performance standards, where we have like 6 performance standards and then the kind of engineering design requirements associated with them. So this is the summary of those. Kind of the key ones to look at here are the new one, water quality infiltration performance standard. That's to infiltrate the water quality storm event, which is 1.61 inches in 36 hours. And then the flow control for the separate storm system, that is now going to be based on limiting the post-development peak runoff rates to pre-development peak runoff rates for the 2, 5, and 10-year 24-hour storm events. We've removed the 25-year storm event from that requirement. And then we've separated out this flow control for hydromodification, and that is focused on limiting the post-development peak runoff rate to the pre-development peak runoff rate for 1/2 the 2-year 24-hour storm event. And that requirement is designed to kind of protect stream channels from changes in the flows that they're seeing due to urbanization. Then the flow control standard for the combined system is not changing. All right, now I've hinted at this, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about our new water quality infiltration requirement. So what we're doing is requiring infiltration of the water quality storm event on sites with at least half an inch per hour of infiltration. We're applying this in our separate storm systems other than the Willamette, the Columbia, or the Slough. These are generally the areas in green that are circled with in red on this map. The goal of this is to reduce hydromodification impacts in streams. So hydromodification is the change in the structure of a stream channel through usually kind of erosion and incision, because development changes the flow patterns off of a site. So water runs off differently from a parking lot than it does from a forest. And that change in the runoff patterns has negative impacts on stream channels. So we're doing it to minimize those impacts and to improve water quality. So we're basing this requirement on a infiltration feasibility map. So this map will display areas with suitable conditions for infiltration. So the key thing that this map shows are the exclusion areas. The exclusion areas will include the landslide hazard area. This is the area in purple. Areas with slopes that are greater than or equal to 25%, which is the red. And then our geotechnical staff are adding some additional risk areas. For example, the hilltops don't show up on the landslide map or the 25% slopes map, and we'll be filling those in. Then there are also some other areas with certain geologic conditions that are not conducive for infiltration that will also be excluded. Setbacks from those exclusion areas will be added during permit review. And then sites outside of the risk area, so the areas in white, will be required to evaluate infiltration feasibility on their site. The criteria for the infiltration requirement, the requirement will apply if there's an offsite connection. So you have to have the ability to connect to a storm system, which is not the case for every site in these parts of the city. The infiltration rate has to be at least a half an inch per hour, and other site constraints do not prevent infiltration. So all of the other reasons that you can't do infiltration on a site still apply. If you're within a setback, if there's contamination on your site, or if there's specific geologic conditions that are not identified on the exclusion map that can be demonstrated. So along with this, we're also updating our water quality design storm. We are extending the hyetograph from 24 hours to 36 hours. So the duration of our new design storm is increasing by 12 hours. We're doing this to better match our actual rainfall record and particularly to better match the peak rates. So you'll see on this graph, the existing water quality design storm is in green. The proposed 36-hour storm is in blue. And then the red line is our 10-minute water quality rainfall intensity rate. So for facilities that are designed to manage the peak intensity, that's what that red line is. And then this blue line is the volume of the storm distributed over 36 hours. And we developed this through a kind of rigorous statistical analysis of our historic rainfall record. So now I'm going to get into some updates or the design updates to private stormwater facilities. We are restricting ponds to apply to public projects only. So we are taking those out of the list of available facility types for private development projects. We're removing subsurface sand filters as an option. This is a facility type that rarely gets built and isn't really needed. We're adding a new soakage trench detail with an overflow connection, and that will be used for when infiltration rates are between half an inch and 2 inches per hour. And we provided more guidance for large bioretention systems. We've updated our setbacks for all infiltration facilities, setbacks from steep slopes. We've changed the definition of steep slope from 20% to 25% for the application of SWM setbacks. We've reduced the setback requirements for grade breaks and slopes between 25 and 50% that are less than 20 feet high. So the new setback requirements will be based on the height of that grade break. So the setback will be 5 times the height of the grade break or 100 feet, whichever is less. We've removed the property line setbacks for filter strips. The filter strip size takes into account the amount of space that you need to manage that flow. And so we don't need this additional setback on the end of the facility. And then for rain gardens are an infiltration facility. They used to have facility-specific setback requirements, but we are now matching those to be the same as our other infiltration facilities. Here's what our new simplified approach soakage trench for slower draining soils. So this will help, this design will be useful for meeting the infiltration of the water quality event standard. For this, we will be requiring a silt trap prior to the soakage trench facility. This is an example of a silt trap that Gresham has been using for some time. And then we'll be requiring an overflow connection to the separated storm system. We also have some changes for planters and basins for our water quality infiltration facilities for planters, basins, and soakage trenches. So all infiltration planters and basins with under drains will now have an elevated discharge pipe at all infiltration rates. This will facilitate infiltrating additional volumes of water. We are adjusting the depth for our simplified approach aggregate layers. They are changing to be 6 inches of drain rock for the under drain pipe and then 3 inches of gravel for that filter layer. We're allowing corrugated HDPE under drain pipe and encouraging recessed under drains for our presumptive and performance approach facilities. Here are what the details or draft details look like for the elevated discharge pipe. Here's a potential elbow configuration to accomplish that. You'll see that elevating that discharge pipe increases storage in the facility, and particularly in these slower draining soils where this requirement will apply, that will kind of really help those facilities infiltrate the amount of water that we're looking for them to do. Here's the HDPE corrugated slotted drain pipe. This is a new pipe that we are adding as an acceptable underdrain material. The understanding is that the current underdrain material can be somewhat difficult to obtain. And so this material is widely available and will be acceptable for use for underdrains in private facilities. We're going to be encouraging, but not requiring, the use of a recessed underdrain in presumptive and performance approach facilities. This is an underdrain that's placed in a trench below the facility instead of within the blended soil in the facility. It'll increase the soil volume within the facility and hopefully be better for plant health. For eco-roofs, pervious pavement and dispersion, we have some changes to these. We've updated and included guidance on how eco-roofs meet our specified performance standards. So how do you credit an eco-roof for water quality treatment or the water quality infiltration requirement? One key example of this is that the Central City eco-roof requirement requires 60% coverage of a roof. However, if you are in the separated storm system and water quality treatment is required, that 60% coverage does not meet that standard for the full site because the other 40% of your roof still needs water quality treatment. We are recommending pavers for pervious pavement on property to avoid systems being paved over, particularly with pervious asphalt. It is often difficult to tell that that is a unique material. And so there's concern that repaving projects will result in switching over to standard asphalt, and then that will cause significant problems. We also have new guidance for allowing pervious pavement on slower draining soils. For dispersion, we're clarifying that downspout splash blocks are by exception only, and updating our trench dispersion requirements and moving those from the appendix to the body of the SWM. Trench dispersion is a facility type that allows you to spread flows across a hill slope, and it serves as a discharge point for sites that do not have access to a storm system and cannot infiltrate the 10-year event. This was formerly called upland dispersion in the appendix, and we've just kind of added a little bit more detail and guidance to that design approach and brought it into the body of the SWM. This does not meet water quality treatment requirements. So depending on what the requirements are for your site, you'd still have to meet those other performance standards. We have some kind of process changes. We are shifting operations and maintenance and drainage reserve notice of condition form recording. We're shifting the responsibility from the permit applicant to the city, and we'll primarily be implementing that in Multnomah County to start. But this should reduce the number of back and forths between the city and permit applicants, because often the operations and maintenance plan recording requires an additional few extra check sheets during the permit review process. To accomplish that, we have a new recording fee that's just a pass-through for us to cover the costs of recording at the county. We are also creating the authority for BES to require construction certifications from the designer for sites where city staff cannot perform inspections. So a key example of this is if you have a site that's doing flow control with an orifice, and that orifice is within a maintenance hole that city staff do not have the ability to access, or it would require confined space entry. For those sorts of situations, we will require that the designer provide a construction certification. It's sort of similar to a special inspection, but that has a very specific definition, and so we're using a different term here. All right, now I'm going to get into the changes for green streets. We have some new details for that upturned elbow, for the kind of elevated discharge point for infiltrating green streets. Also the recessed underdrain that I spoke about before. We have a new modified thickened curb and gutter detail. We will be requiring small notched forebays for curb extensions. Just for maintenance purposes, having that forebay is really critical for our field staff. We have also added a new outline for the standard project narrative that will be going on the plan sets, and that will better sort of memorialize the design assumptions that went into the project for kind of future consideration. We've updated designer notes for how to handle and communicate relative elevations within the facility to facilitate accurate construction. There are a lot of critical elevation points within green streets that are necessary for them to work properly, and proper construction is an ongoing challenge for these facility types. And then we're adding a link to the current Green Street data table for plan sets so that that is easily accessible on our website. We have some significant improvements for lined facilities. We have some new details for liner attachments that better show how to attach liners in facilities with check dams and multiple cells. We have a new requirement in the construction specifications for the contractor who's installing the liner to test the seam seals after they're installed they use compressed air to find any gaps in those seals. I guess it's a standard service that they provide that Portland has not required in the past. We're also adding a requirement to protect the liner with geotextile fabric so that it is to help minimize the risk of puncture, particularly between the liner and the aggregate, the drain rock in the bottom. We're adding a new CG3 catch basin detail to use in line facilities that are less than 5 feet wide instead of using a beehive. Trying to fit a beehive within a line facility when it's only 5 feet wide doesn't leave enough space around the beehive to install the liner correctly. So instead, the catch basin will move to the edge, kind of outside of the facility footprint. So you can have a nice rectangular box for your facility to install the liner, and then the catch basin will be on the edge at that planter wall. We've also specified that the planter wall bench, so that the bench of native soil that remains to pour the planter wall on top of. We're specifying that the maximum width for that is 6 inches. And we've had some facilities constructed where contractors are leaving 12, 18 inches on that wall. And that really starts to encroach on the internal volume of the facility and can be a problem. We have a new modified thickened curb and gutter detail down here at the bottom. We need this for streets that have a high crown, so that there's still enough space at the bottom of that when we need to attach a liner. So that's the goal for that detail. We have some changes to public sumps for our UICs and the public right-of-way. We have 2 design approaches. The first is managing the 10-year peak flow with a safety factor of 2. This is the current design approach for public sump systems. And then the second, this is a new one, to manage the 24-hour 10-year design storm with a safety factor of 2. That's a kind of more modeling heavy approach. It's a design approach that's been available for private sumps for a long time, and we are now adding this to our public sumps. We have new design guidance and requirements for water quality sumps in the MS4 and the separated storm sewer areas. These will be required to manage the water quality design storm with a safety factor of 2. And then because they are only infiltrating that water quality design storm 1.61 inches instead of the 10-year event, 3.4 inches, those will be required to be an inline configuration with a piped overflow back to the storm system. We have new language to require checking for depth of groundwater when installing a second sump in series to make sure that first sump has an adequate separation from groundwater before installing the second one. And then we have a link to we'll have an updated sump data table. I don't think this is it. We have new guidance. This is a brand new section for large bioretention systems. It's still sort of general guidance at this time, and draws on the experience that the city has. We've been building more of these recently and kind of notably on the Capitol Highway project. We have guidance on recessed under drains, the importance of spreading the flows across the facility. Since these are so large, we really need that flow to spread out across the whole surface area so that the whole facility is activated and we're getting that infiltration through all of the soil. And then again, particular focus on the need for an adequately sized forebay, kind of keep as much sediment out of the facility as possible so that to kind of ease future maintenance and kind of keep plant health, keep the plants healthy and safe. Some other changes for filter strips in the right-of-way, we are promoting the use of a grass seed mix. The current language in the manual sort of implies that you're required to plant it like a green street, and that's not really the intent. We have 2 soil blends for green streets. The current standard blend for sort of simple unlined infiltration facilities. And then we have a new high fines soil blend for lined facilities or facilities where the soil is not sitting on top of native. So when there's an underdrain, when there's gravel across the entire bottom of the facility. And this high fines blend we found better supports plant health because it has more mineral fines for the for the plants and also really helps retain moisture. We have also updated our plant lists and planting templates. For manufactured stormwater treatment technologies, we're going to be requiring a grated inlet for catch basin units. The goal of that is, so we're doing that based on experience that we've had with some installations on Beaverton Hillsdale Highway, where street sweeping on that road causes debris to build up within the curb inlet and prevents water from getting into those facilities so that it is actually, they're actually functioning. Along with this, we are updating the presumptive approach calculator to pull in all of these new design standards. We have the new performance standards in there. We're updating the infiltration and under drain outflow calculations. Flow control for hydromodification is now going to be using a pre-development curve number of 72 for the forested condition. And then we're renaming configuration F, which is the which is an unlined facility that has an elevated discharge point. We're renaming that to kind of combine that with configuration C so that you now have kind of 2 choices, configuration C with a flat for the discharge point that's level with the underdrain and one that is elevated. We have some improvements to our drainage reserve requirements. We have specific guidance on when to apply a wider reserve. Our standard reserve is 30 feet. The wider reserve will be applied to channels when there is an identifiable top of bank and the channel is wider than 5 feet. When we have some more information about when a drainage reserve is applied over a drainage way. So you can have something that is identified as a drainage way and the city, this is when the city will decide to not apply the protections in a reserve. So within the right of way, we review protection of and impacts to the drainage way, but we do not apply a reserve on top of drainage ways that are within the right of way. We also state outright the drainage reserves are not applied over systems that were constructed as conveyance for a site. So if your on-site stormwater conveyance is through a series of ditches and swales that are at the surface level instead of in catch basins and pipes, we're not going to apply a drainage reserve on top of those. We are changing the terminology that we use from allowable activities to minor encroachments. We'll still be reviewing those, but they are generally allowed with minimal review. And we are also adding the removal of trees as permitted through Title 11 or Title 3 as a minor encroachment. So BES is not taking the lead on review for that. We're deferring to the requirements and protections in Title 11 and Title 33. We also reviewed and updated planting densities and the mitigation requirements for impacts within the reserve. Here is the adoption and review schedule. The materials are available on our website, which is posted here. The public comment period is open until August 19th. We will be going to City Council with some related code changes on the 31st. Everything will be in effect on October 1st with a 3-month grace period. The 3-month grace period applicability applies differently depending on the kind of project or the type of permit that you are submitting. So land use reviews will be conducted under the manual in place at the time of submittal for a complete application. Building permits will be reviewed based on the permit in date, and public works projects will be reviewed based on the date of concept development is accepted for review. And then capital improvement projects and interagency projects, so city projects, will be reviewed based on the 60% plan submittal date. All right, now I'm going to get into some related council actions that are not within the manual itself, but are closely associated with it. So at the end of July, like I said, we're bringing updates to the code that gives us the authority for the Stormwater Manual, Chapter 1738, Drainage and Water Quality. At the end of August, we have this proposal for Public Works Green Street Planting and Establishment Period, a new fee for that. These two items aren't really officially open for public comment, but we wanted to provide information about them during our outreach work. However, we are definitely open to receiving comment, so reach out to us. And then, like anything that's going before City Council, you are welcome to testify in person or through written submitted testimony. So the code changes for 1738 that are on the consent agenda for Council on the 31st. We are removing the 500 square foot threshold from code. This is not exactly where the change is happening. We'll be increasing that threshold in the body of the SWM. We're removing the non-conforming upgrades trigger. We are updating the impervious area definition to align with changes that we made in 1736, which is our the code that covers our rates and charges. And we are adding, this is where we add the authority to require the designer certification that I already spoke about. Then we have some other updates to enforcement language that just brings that language up to date with our current practices and language that we already have in other sections of code. Now we have the sort of additional proposal for a Green Street, for how we handle Green Street planting and establishment through the public works permit process. So for public works permit projects that are required to build green streets, those projects are required to create a planting plan, plant the green streets, care for the plants for the 2-year maintenance warranty period, and then to extend the establishment period if required. Public Works permittees may currently opt to enter into agreement with BES to provide those services instead. Our proposal is to make that required for all Public Works permit projects with green streets. So to shift the responsibility for planting and establishment from the permittee to BES. We would accomplish that by creating a new fee based on the kind of policy proposals and look at historic green street construction. We think this might apply to half a dozen or so projects per year. Here's what those fee changes look like. We would this would replace the public green stormwater infrastructure inspection fee and replace it with the public green stormwater infrastructure inspection, planting, and 2-year maintenance fee. The fees would have 2 components. There would be a base fee, and the base fee would be based on kind of how many green street facilities you have in your project. So there's one fee for projects that have 1 to 5 green street facilities, and a second higher fee for projects that have 6 or more. And then we have the per square foot of facility area fee, and that's based on the total square footage of kind of area that needs planting within the facilities for the project. We also are establishing fees that would apply to larger buyer retention facilities, but I'm not showing those in this presentation just for ease of communication. That is included in the ordinance package. Here are the outcomes and benefits. Here are some example fees that are applied to kind of previous projects. So you can see how those kind of shake out for a project with 2 facilities and then another one with 6. For the applicant, from the applicant perspective, this fee would cover the development of the planting plan. These are things that they wouldn't have to do anymore. Applicants would no longer be required to create a planting plan, to acquire plant materials, and to hire somebody to plant them, and then to provide irrigation and other maintenance for that 2-year maintenance warranty period. It removes the need for active management of the landscape elements of within the Green Street for public works after substantial completion. I think for the most part, this is the only element of the project that does need that ongoing management. It should facilitate projects reaching substantial completion faster. And also, since bonds are released at substantial completion, it could facilitate bonds being released sooner. It also will reduce the size of the bond because the plant materials and the care of them will no longer need to be included in that cost. From the city's perspective, this really increases efficiency for city staff. We will no longer be reviewing the planting plan. It will eliminate our ongoing inspections and enforcement during construction and establishment period for Green Streets built through public works permits. And it puts our trained staff in charge of the planting and establishment period and should result in better outcomes for Green Street establishment, which benefits our city system, and then also the kind of neighbors and community around that facility. Here's the schedule and process for that. The first reading at council, we're targeting August 28th. And then the proposed implementation schedule would be for projects at 60% by October 1st. If you've hit 60% before October 1, you can use the current approach and fees. However, any final permits issued after March 1st would be required to pay this new fee. So if it takes you longer than 6 months to get from 60% to final permit issuance, then you would have to pay those fees regardless of when you finish 60%. So here's the overall schedule and a reminder of how to comment. So the materials are all available on our website. For the Stormwater Manual, see our website for the instructions. There's a comment form you can download and our contact information is available there. For council items, like I said, these are not officially out for public comment, but we are completely open to feedback. Here's the contact information, and you can submit written testimony or testify at the city council hearing. The schedule, again, public comment opened on the 15th. We have our city council hearing on the 31st for 1738. Public comment period closes on August 19th. We're taking the Green Street planting and establishment fee to council at the end of August. October 1, the Stormwater Manual and all of these updates will be in effect. And then as of January 1, all projects will need to comply with the 2024 SWM. That's the end. So if people have questions, I'm happy to answer those now.